Okay, should be live. Yep. I need to get some organization for my desk. Okay, so quick stream, just to keep me focused on what I'm trying to do. Outbox. So the purpose of the outbox is basically to put the messages into an interim state where they're collected, so that if the pieces that are processing them are not ready to process them, they're not going to fail. It also means I can distribute them or basically start up an entire system just for dealing with these messages. So there are some benefits to doing this beyond the simple stuff, right? Which is right now transactionally storing these messages so that if the transaction rolls back, I don't have events that are lies published. So what I'm doing is I am going to mimic what I did for the Kafka stuff almost exactly at this point, right? I just got to figure out this piece in a second. And I am going to then create a SQL Server implementation of Outbox storage, which will then retrieve these messages and commit the messages. So the idea is that the message is an iOutbox message, right? And then that message, I can implement it here so that I can make the key. I'm trying to decide that I can implement it. And this is why this is a short stream, and this is why there's no camera. Because I'm clearly not quite with it this morning, as much as I thought I was. The actual implementation will implement the actual message, because it might have more fields or whatever. It might, so I'm not dictating what a message looks like here, including the ID, etc. It gives it the ability to have a specific implementation here. So if I choose a GUID or I store it differently, I don't have to worry about that. As long as I can do something that gives it an identifier, it doesn't really matter. Because that message gets out as long as it's got an event. Again, that right now I don't have that. This is building a generic publish so that it publishes the right type. The issue that I hit yesterday pretty much indicated this for me, why this was a problem. So let's go to, I'm going to go to Kafka extensions. I want to look at my Outbox implementation for, okay, so I have an event. The event is T-event. So I must have in Kafka memory message outbox. I must have cast this. Post async retrieve next message. Next message outbox. Oh, because I was using it in memory. Yes, that is a point. Okay, so what this is saying, what I'm learning there is that what I expect here is this event to be an actual populated thing. So it yet again leads to, so I don't need those two fields, I don't think. I think what I need is kind of T event. Yeah. And T event is a class. Right, I don't need to be able to create a new one of them, and it doesn't have to, it doesn't, and iNotification, probably. Has to be iNotification. So the reason being, this message that I'm going to pull out here, right, which we'll st event, event, right? Out. Message, Outbox message. That's the problem with that. Outbox message. This now needs object event, right? That could go away there. Yeah, I'm just trying to. I'm looking what I did before just to verify how I did it. Yeah, so in this one, I do object outbox message ID, and then object event is event, right? So that keeps that working. So this is the implicit implementation of that interface, right? So this is just saying, hey, when I actually use a version, it's going to be this, right? If I'm only referring to it by this interface rather than this full interface, right? Go and give me the actual values that I have in the real one so that I get the right type out, right? That's what that's doing. It's the implicit implementation. Because on here, all I know about is that lowest level interface. I don't know about anything higher. I don't know about any generics or anything. And that's why this is being built this way, because what happens is when we pull the message out, right, it doesn't necessarily have, because it's using that Outbox message, it doesn't have the type available. So what we do is we pull that information out, we build a generic version that now puts back T event, because it pulls it from this object, which is of the right type. And then invokes that method, passing it that event, and then it can publish that event, right? So this is just kind of a very long-winded way around getting that working. So now what we do need to do is implement the SQL Server version of the storage and the SQL version of the message, right? So this will be SQL Server Outbox storage right this second, just to align it. I can worry about naming and stuff later. So we're going to implement Outbox storage, right? Now this is going to require a little bit of thought. So right now, I'm not in a position where I can stress test this system. So I'm going to write a really naive implementation here because I can't validate a larger scale thing, right? So I do know from experience that there is going to be locking issues here, that I'm going to have multiple requests coming into this piece to get data at the same time, right? Or rather, maybe I won't, because I'm treating this as in an out separation, right? So I'm using the Outbox publisher is the thing that would add, right? So the SQL Server notification Outbox, this is creating the message, and it's creating a very short scoped context connection. Similarly, this one will only be one per service, right? So it might not be a problem. What we've had in the past, what I've experienced in the past, is some sort of stress, probably on the publisher side, to be honest, of putting those things in. But again, it might not be an issue. So I'm going to keep it kind of naive right now, and I do know that I could have issues in the future with scale. So what I want to do is make sure that at some point in the near future, I do build out some level of integration tests and also stress tests so that I can actually test this system. Okay, how much would it actually hold up to under actual load if I was publishing events and stuff constantly? Okay, so the service is agnostic to the storage, right? Because the service is going to take out a message, as long as it can take out a message and it can publish that message to the actual domain event publisher, which in this case is Mediator, right? And again, this is why this is Mediator extensions, kind of, right? As long as it can do that, it doesn't matter what's storing that. So if I create an in-memory store, I can still do that, right? The in-memory store would still be valid. The challenge is with the in-memory store, those events would still exist, so they'd still publish, right? This way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read, and we're going to hope in the first version that we get that the messages are, because they're not committed by the other transaction, that they're not available for us, right? I don't want a partially written message being picked up here, so maybe I have to put, some recommitted stuff on there to make sure that it's only a committed record that actually gets picked up. But we'll learn, right? I'm not going to try and do that out of the box because I don't know if it's actually a real thing. And yeah. So in here, I'm going to inject my DB context factory. And this is going to be of my context, which is Outbox DB context. The reason I'm injecting the factory and not the context is because I will actually open a connection and pull it here, right? Connection pooling will mean that I don't keep reopening and closing connections, but at least the scope of this data is short-lived enough that I can I just open the connection, get the data, and then I'm gone. I don't have to keep a long connection open, right? And similar for the commit. The commit will be, yep, this one's done. Update, remove the record, or we could implement it as a processed, right? So we could keep track of this. This would give us some sort of auditing of the events that happened, even the events that happened in order of them happening potentially, right? Yeah, this would do this. So let's truncate that one, otherwise that's going to be in bad shape. So I think for now it might not actually be a bad idea to put the processed on there, but we'll come back around on that in a minute. So this is going to do a few things. Async, so go await, using var context equals await factory dot create DB context async cancellation token. So now we have our connection. var messages is outbox messages. Order by date added. So it's going to get the oldest first, which makes sense, and get the first to default async. There we go. That's the one we want, right? So there's a little bit more involved in doing this right now, because what we actually need to implement our outbox message. SQL outbox message. Now I'm only putting SQL in there because if you were debugging this, you'd then see quickly that you shouldn't really not know, but you would be able to clearly indicate, oh, I'm using SQL outbox message. Because if you actually did have different implementations and you swap one out, then it would be, obvious. Now I'm tagging all this as SQL. Well, these are called SQL Server. I'm not putting SQL Server outbox message there right now, but because it will give you enough to know which library you're using. But if I implemented a Postgre, then this is not the only SQL, right? Microsoft just has SQL Server as a name. So this is going to be interesting, because this is going to be T key. No, this is going to be T event, right? And this is going to be an I outbox message of int T event, where T event is I notification. I notification. Wow. I promise I can type. I notification. Don't have much option there. Right. Okay. So at the bare minimum, we have these properties, right? And yeah, I'm not doing that. Not doing that. Okay. Set right equals null. So now we need to, in this piece, deal with that. How do we deal with that, right? Well, we have the type from the message, right? So on the message, we have the type, right? That is a string, right? So, how are we going to do that? We're going to return this as return build outbox message from we'll take that. Okay, and this is a private outbox message build outbox message. Wow, that is impressive. That is actually pretty impressive. Activator.create instance that make generic type of type. That's not. That'd be awesome if it worked that way. So what this has done is, okay, if we pass in a null, let's get out. We're not doing anything, right? Why does that not? Why does that have to be? Okay. Because this can be null, so that's why that's there, right? Right. So if the message is null, return null. Right. We can guard against that. If message is null. Right. We don't need to even call into this before we even do that. We can guard that. There we go. We can get rid of that requirement entirely. Right. So we definitely have an outbox message here, and we're definitely going to convert that into an outbox message. Right. The type naming here is a little confusing. I might have to review, but they all represent the same thing. Just this is a stored outbox message. This is an actual message that's going to get processed. So to this piece, to the monitoring service, this is an outbox message. It doesn't care where it gets the storage, how it's stored. But to the storage, it's also the outbox message. It's just a different representation of it, right? It knows that I'm going to create this. That's awesome. New JSON serializer options. And that's the piece I'm always missing. So, yeah. Private const static. No. What's the best way of doing that one? How do I normally do that? I did it. Where did I do it? Outbox closure. No. Yeah, here we go. Private static. That's how I do it. Private static read only. I think on the read that's more appropriate than the camel case necessarily, but yeah. Okay, so type. What's it complain? Type can be null. So yeah, we could still return a null here. So if type is null, return null. Right. If we can't, for whatever reason, cast that type back, which we'll get to afterwards, I still have some. I'm thinking through about which references I actually have here to make sure that I do get that type. This should have access to all the right assemblies at the point this is being run. So there shouldn't be a concern there that this type is actually available. But yeah, that's the only other thing we might have to worry about. Okay, so this is building an Outbox message, but it's expecting that it can pass in. So the content is going to deserialize that type. So this is going to be our event. It's assuming it can pass it in. So from a simplicity standpoint, it might not be a bad idea to actually let it do the constructor arguments here, because it will be cleaner, right? Because we can then just pass them in when we initialize. So what it's saying is it wants to do that, right? So now I just want to create a primary constructor. Yeah, there you go. I don't hate that pattern. It does kind of keep it neat, and I like putting the properties on it so that when you're exposing them publicly as well, there is like it is still what's the word? Not idempotent. I don't mean idempotent. I know what I mean. But it's not a bad pattern overall. You can change those variables internally, but at least if you're going to expose them as well, then you can kind of create and read only. So the reason that helps is because what that does is it passes in ID, date added, and content, right? So we now should have an object created from SQL Server, right? And this one is, I think we are going to put the committed on there just so we can keep track of this, even if later we modify that to be modify that to be a delete. It doesn't really matter. Not null. It can be null. Date process can be null. Default is null. And then yeah, we'll do date processed. Right. So let's script that out. And then go back over here, Mediator Outbox scripts. Right. We don't need that. So now date process goes onto that model. Public date time. I think Esther raised this yesterday. My initial intention was to delete the record, but I can kind of see there's, especially in debugging, there's some benefit to that. I don't believe in leaving data lying around. Unnecessarily. I think that is a poor practice, because if you start getting down the, well, what if I need this later, right? If you start going down that path, then you're going to keep building stuff that you don't need, and you're going to keep storing stuff you don't want to store. So now this has to where m dot date processed is null, right? That's because it's mixing the two styles. And Link doesn't really like that, so that's fine. But I now need to get ones that aren't processed, right? So this will get the next up non-processed record. Now the speed here is I'm ordering by date added, right? I can't rely upon ID. So this is not going to be the fastest. So the more records I add, the slower this table gets, right? Although I've got it is on date added, so I should be able to put an index on date added, which will give me some speed, right? So if I modify this table, I know that it's in this new index, right? Right. So let's do the script again. I'm trying to be thorough about getting the script done all the time, so that SQL scripts, DDL to clipboard. No, that's Liquid Sky. Mediator. Root table. So this will now add. That bugs me. There we go. So if you're watching and you have any questions about what I'm doing, any thoughts or opinions, feel free. I do not mind questions. Hi, don't you also need to add date process to index? Hi, Nickers, how are you doing? Do I need to add date processed? Because I'm checking it, because I'm doing the where on it. Hey, Dota. I don't know, would that be an optimization? I know that I'm ordering it by, so the index will definitely help on the date added. But if I'm doing the where null, hi Etta, how you doing? Good day. Good morning. You are right, Nick, because that is something to learn. Will that add any speed benefit? I mean, I won't see this for a long time, right? So it'll be weeks or months even before I even get to the point where I'm creating enough events in any given system. This is the first iteration. That is a point. I mean, I tend to get through all the material assets and the challenge of being someone who cannot not read something. Well, not reposting everything to my coworkers and overwhelming them. I will say I've never met anyone with so many resources at the fingertips and valid resources. Esther is not dumping just anything in the text. It's all here. There's resources that pertain to what we're talking about and what we're doing, and here's a different opinion or here's a different vision of how that is working. It is quite fascinating to see. But yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, let's not make Dota's brain explode. The no camera today, by the way, is just purely because I did not want to mess around with the camera. I just wanted to start the stream and get on with this Outbox. Okay, so what this does is it makes this a little simpler, this update, right? Because this should now be async. This should literally be, go on, Copilot. You know what I need to do. Whoa, no. Why would I do that? Var Outbox message equals await context dot single or default async. Is find async faster than this? Why? Okay. In this instance, I know that's a safe cast. He's holding back info. I knew it. Indeed have. I know I read 5% of it, but that 5% has been golden. Nice. I'm glad you're growing from that content as well. Hi Keyshawn, how you doing? Good day. Yeah, what I've been doing is I'm good. It's a good start to the day. I have a shorter stream because I do have a karate class I go to on a Saturday morning. which I'm hoping to attend. I had a sparring class last night, which was fun. So I'm feeling good today. I will stream for as long as I possibly can right now while everyone's still asleep. Yeah, but my approach to the content is I need to have application, right? I can't just read and read and read, and I definitely can't read other people's code for too long. So I have to apply it. So I'm just keeping all that sort of stuff in my back pocket, and you know, like I did with this stuff, right? It dawned on me that I'd gone over the solution, and I was able to now come back and do something about it, even if this is a lot of overkill and isn't what people might do. You know, it's yeah, we'll do it that way. I just let Copilot write my code for me these days, it seems. So yeah, there we go. There's our SQL Server Outbox notification. So the way I've done this so far to catch up people, right, is I've basically taken the exact same code from the Kafka version of this and created it in this Mediator version. What this does is it will go and retrieve the next message. If there is if there is a message, or there's no message because we haven't got any messages queued, we'll just continue. Continue will then delay for a certain amount of time, right? Which by default will be 25 milliseconds, just to give the system some breathing room. It will then try and publish that message if there is a message, and we build this back up as a generic event. And this was what was tripping me up yesterday, and I did post in the Discord after the stream. Yesterday we were hitting a problem, and this is worth learning for everyone, right? So I was like, okay, well, you know, when I add domain event, right, I move this to an object because I kind of had an inkling of what was going wrong, but I didn't quite nail down what was going wrong. So what I was doing wrong was I had this as iDomain event, right? Which is fine. However, what that meant was that everything that came in there kind of lost its type. It lost its specificity. And we had now tDomain event. So I added this in so that I actually get the object in there. It's not just an iDomain event, right? And then I don't think but that wasn't the major difference. The major difference came in, and there's no harm in doing that. It's just, you know, more specific. I don't think that caused the actual problem. See, the actual problem, that's entity base, in infrastructure, interceptor, here we go, in the domain event. So the actual problem was now losing that type, and it's the same problem as here, right? It's the exact same issue. So what I do is I get a generic version of I get the version of the method down in this file, right, which is this one. I then, for each of these in meta entries, the domain events, I go and get their actual type, right? So having that type available, not losing it and having iDomain event so that everything was iDomain event, I now have the actual type of the entry. And then I can build a generic method that actually invokes publish with that actual type, right? So now I get published address created. I don't get an iDomain event that happens to be address created in this instance, right? So I'm not losing that type, and that was the cause of the problem, right? It's because I was going too low and losing that type information. But that's how you create generic collections, right? You create collections of type of object. So yeah, but that was causing the problem. And it's the exact same problem here, right? Where I have to go and say, okay, well now I want to invoke this, but I can only invoke this if I actually have the right type, right? So I had hit this issue, so that's why it seemed familiar. But yeah, we'll follow this pattern. Now the challenge here is if a message fails in this, it will just continually fail, right? It'll just take longer to fail, longer to fail, longer to fail. That might be something I want to review later. But for right now, yeah, it doesn't really hurt. For the purpose of testing this, it does not hurt at all. Okay, so we now need, so we have the service, we have the SQL Server. We now need to do some configuration because we now need to say, okay, use the SQL Server Outbox. For right now, we can do all that configuration in Liquid Sky in the actual setup, right? But later on, we're going to have to do, I'm going to have to create some wrappers and stuff around this for easy configuration. Okay, because here we're going to have to do builder.services.add hosted service of Outbox monitoring service, right? We need the hosted service. We're also going to have to do services.add transient. I don't think that's right, but because that service is going to run, right? Outbox storage SQL Server Outbox storage, right? That service is going to run constantly, right? So it injects the Outbox storage. That's there all the time. The reason the Outbox storage I actually put on there a factory is because then I can just open the connection and close the connection. If I pass in a SQL DB context into that, that's open the entire time. I'm never going to close that. That's not a really good idea. Because if I pause this or whatever, or I put in a bigger delay, then I don't want an open connection. So that's something to keep in mind. And as the system gets more and more complicated, these sorts of things are going to be ever more important to keep track of. Okay, so we have our storage, we have our monitoring service, we have our events. What's the worst that happens? Let's run the application and see what happens. So we have no events in the queue, right? So we shouldn't process anything we don't want to process. And I'm sure we're going to hit other issues, right? I'm sure we're going to hit, oh, why are we doing that? Or, oh, that shouldn't happen. Or, you know, some quirkiness of this process. But the main point is, oh, yeah. Well, we're reading the domain events. Yeah. I think we're going to do something different there. On the Outbox, we're not going to log to the console. Otherwise, nothing makes sense, right? Because it's going to do that every 25 milliseconds. So the good news is the service started up and started monitoring the queue. The bad news is I was logging everything out, so. But it does it anyway, because, yeah. But there's the Outbox. Okay, so we should be able to create first Outbox stored thing, right? And what we should be able to do Billy okay. Interesting. We do not have date processed on them, but we have events created. So are we getting them and failing to cast them is the question. Because again, now don't forget we now have, although there's not a pause here, so that doesn't lead me to believe it's actually doing that. So if we go to our services, and this is the benefit of having it the way I've got it, right? We should hit breakpoint. Okay, so if we go in, right, we have a message. We do have a message. I bet it doesn't cast back. That's the problem. Type is null. Okay. This is what I was worrying about. That is not the actual full assembly name. You can't create a type off this. So if I do type dot get type, right, that it fails. If I do that from tenant management dot domain, is it domain? Did I get that right? If that assembly is not loaded, that's the challenge. This worker service, this should be running in the context of the application, right? Which should have access to that assembly. Because there is, watch, if we do, let's bring up the trusty link pad, right? Let's create public. Now this is a bit of a challenge because the link pad doesn't quite function the way other things do. Thing, public int value. No, it's not. I don't want it on assembly because assembly would be right. So if I do type of, so the thing is I've done this, right? Get type dot full name dot dump, right? I've done that. No. System runtime type. No, that's not it. That's it. Right, sorry, I've done that. Right, so user query plus thing. I think what I need is an assembly qualified type. Assembly qualified name dot dump. Yeah, I need no, it's not that one. There's two versions of the name you can get. And one is it's not assembly qualified, I'm sure. Try it. Okay, so this is the problem. It's determining there's no message to process. So that's why it's not getting stuck in a loop. It's not actually erroring. It's actually pretty resilient. But what we're storing in here is not enough to reconstruct a type. Assembly get type. So when we are in our here, there's the challenge. No, it's not, is it? No, it's the publisher that's the problem. Outbox publisher. Also, notification outbox is this. So let's truncate that again. Let's go and look. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is see it in situ, right? because you can see what you actually have available at that point. There's no messages, so I don't have to worry about that. And then, I mean, the good thing is nothing blew up. It actually did get to the type. It still serialized everything. Everything went in there. It went to get the type out, so the message was correct that it was getting. So that is a good positive first step. Make another tenant. Be the fix. Okay, so we're here. So we go here and do get type. Okay, so there's our full name, right? There's our assembly qualified name, right? Now, yeah, I thought I could do that. Let's test something. Or in here, right? So I think if I do type.get type, yeah, that gives me a type. And I think if I have that, it's enough to get me a type. Yes, it is. That's the problem. But I thought there was another, so there's another interim version that I thought was possible. What am I thinking of? Maybe, hold on. No, because that assembly that get type. No, because assembly needs an actual, a focus assembly. Yeah, I'm not after that specifically, and I'm not again after the execute assembly. I need the assembly qualified name because it needs to know that that assembly is loaded. The type is not enough just off of its name or even its full name. But so if I do that and do .get assembly, yeah, see, okay. So let's try it this way. I mean, it doesn't hurt to do it this way, right? Assembly qualified name, right? It does not hurt this because we're loaded in the same domain as, and that's an overloaded term here. We're loaded in the same uh, application domain. The worker service is still in the job. The job is still in the Liquid Sky API context, right? So that assembly that contains that type is loaded. So if I give it an assembly qualified name, it should be able to reconstitute the type from the name. So did I actually create that then? That tenant? No, I didn't because I didn't create. Yeah, so this one, I stopped it running, right? So, okay, so notification outbox. There we go, they all processed. So because it's got the fully qualified name, right, it can reconstitute the type. That's the key there. Now, this is enough without the version blah, 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 blah on the end, right? You don't actually need all that stuff. And there's no public key token because these are not published assemblies. And they're not like validated assemblies. But this is enough to reconstitute the type. So all that code, without any further debugging, actually did what it should have done. And we should be able to find, we have events in Kafka for Billy Fix and make another tenant. Fetch. Data catalog. Yeah, I get it. Stop bugging me. There's make another tenant. And there's Billy Fitz. So it did publish the events because they got into Kafka, so those notifications happened. So now we have another challenge, right? Just to verify this is working properly. Now this is bugging me. That is something we're gonna have to figure out how to turn off at some point, because I do not want. I want the SQL debugging of my main context, but not the subcontext. If I move the what am I thinking about here? If I move the worker service out to its own job, right? So let's say I decide that there's enough events going through the system, I want this now to be distributed. This is where this becomes really flexible, right? Because now even events in my own system, I could actually run a second set of a second version of my application that doesn't get connected to by anything else, and it will process. So I can actually scale out even the main event processing. But I would need to pull in, if I split them out as individual pieces, I still now need to pull in the actual libraries. This thread is highly interesting to me. Makes me wonder how often as a dev I inadvertently ignore customer complaints. What's... Oh, FYI, .NET 8 release today, not preview, not RC, 4 release, and LTS, that. Okay. Yeah. So the reality was, I mean, you guys actually watched me deal with that, right? I moved to .NET 8 and I used Rider 2023.2, right? You watched me deal with it. They didn't. It's not that it wasn't compatible. It's not like the application completely balked. It's that some of the refactorings and stuff it didn't automatically suggest. The code still compiled. It knew how to deal with that thing. So there's just a few features it was missing. But you could still do them because you could still use the language feature. And honestly, it wasn't even 4 weeks, I don't think. Considering the cadence of updates to .NET 8, yeah, it is a little bit silly. I don't think they'll go 4 weeks again. Well, they actually are on a release schedule as well. So I don't have that many complaints about it, right? I dealt with it. And if I had features that I absolutely needed in that critical period, it's not like the IDE went, no, I don't know how to deal with that, and crashed every time. The IDE didn't become all of a sudden unstable. So yeah, .NET release is a known quantity, but in the same, I don't think it's as big of a deal as all that. But maybe I don't see the things that they see. Maybe my experience is not. And again, I'm not using it in production, right? I'm not using this. I'm using this on a stream a couple of hours a day. Simple qualified name wasn't really nice, was it? It's not. There is a version you can get without that fluff on it, which doesn't really make a difference, right? Yeah. By the way, I'm using Rider on Mac OS M1 Max 32 gig. Nice. I like the Mac. I've got a Mac for work with that spec. Is this endpoint enough necessary maintenance without realizing it in the name of a new feature development? I don't know. Rider does have a pretty tight release schedule. They're always updating. You can go EAP. They always allow EAPs if they're prototyping stuff. and you can give, and there's quite a good feedback cycle. So I don't really think there's a major issue in this. I think that people are. Is it good to see we're not fully compatible? No, but they say we're not fully compatible. Not that we're not totally. It's not like it starts and goes, oh, you can't use .NET 8 in here. It works. You just have to use some workarounds temporarily. Yeah. Um, yeah, and Microsoft want people using Visual Studio, but considering what Rider is, and it's not their primary product, we got to remember that, right? Microsoft isn't developing Visual Studio anymore for Java or PHP or whatever. It kind of supports other things, but it's not a primary concern. This IDE is not just .NET. He's got some more information for you. He's holding it back on you. Okay, so post it, let me drown. The curse of having the need to consume the knowledge and not be able to leave it alone. Although yesterday, for me, it's I can't leave something like this unleft. I have to solve the problem and see if it does get me further forward. Okay, test containers. That is something we are going to look at very soon because I do want to do integration testing, and test containers would be an answer for that. I did see that the other week. So I am interested in knowing your thoughts on that as you get forward. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm interested in your output from that. Okay, so we have a working outbox, we have events. Now let's go and test the one thing that I need to test before we move forward with this. So, originally I thought I'd have to learn from scratch, but as an example. Nice. Well, the Discord is a great place to share resources. If you find any useful links and stuff on test containers, or you feel that if you guys feel that I should organize the Discord differently, if you feel that there's a better organization or a better way of dealing with things, please let me know. And that goes for the stream as well, right? You guys are in here pretty much every day. I do, and several of you subscribe, and I really appreciate that. And I do want to make it useful for you as well. So if you feel that there's organization I can do, if there's things I can set up differently, there's things that would help you get to that information, let me know. I'm open to the ideas on that. But yeah, that would be perfect. I mean, if you've got any resources and stuff to share on the test containers, that is something we will have to cover. I don't have an option in that one, right? Because realistically, I've talked about integration testing for years, and I've done bits and pieces here and there, and then never really done it. But for this application, it would be kind of daft of me um, to not do that. Right? Yeah, if you do it and you link out, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I probably there's things I do on the stream that I think that I should make a better effort of doing, like either the short videos or create blog posts. Um, I would really love guidance on that from you guys. If there's things that I've done that you think would be useful to write up in any way, you know, or things that I do that are different that would help me to explain more. I really would love some guidance on how to make that more accessible to other people, because I feel that what I do is worth sharing and is worth doing. I feel that my perspective on things does help. The Outbox pattern in a short would be amazing, since most people don't use that pattern. Yeah. Yeah. How would you present that? Would you present that as, here's an Outbox? Would you do the Kafka version or the Mediator version? And because the Mediator version is kind of like a niche, just do it as a do it as a development piece. Like, here's how to develop it. So kind of like the in-memory version of it. Okay. So more the pattern rather than the actual implementation. Huh, maybe I'll brainstorm that, make up a script of some form, and run it past you. Not a specific implementation yet. Go over the pattern. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll think through a script. Okay, so we need to go to our use cases. So I will share something that's very subtle. Is one of the things that's telling me that the application structure is in a better place than it was, even for me, is the fact that I didn't question where I was clicking then. Right, I went straight to what I needed. I needed to get to the use cases. I knew use cases live in application. I went to register organization. I was there. Right, I understood where to head to get to what I needed, and that's a key metric. Is if you are asked to look at something, how quickly can you get to that thing? Right. It's worth asking yourself about your own code bases as well as you're writing them, because it is a measure of your productivity in application. Is how quickly can you get to the thing you need to do given a requirement, right? Oh, how does the update the user email happen, right? It's not even folder structure. It's more how you're naming your organization, like for your comfort level in the application. How does it go? And test yourself. You know, think of a scenario and test yourself. How quickly can you get there, even with your knowledge of the application, right? Like on something that you haven't just done, right? You know, like I said, maybe you say, hey, how does a billing cycle get triggered, or how does this happen, right? Like think of it as a story, right? If I'm writing a story, well, that's really bad today. If I'm writing a story and I'm asked for to do something, right, and I'm investigating that story to say how does it function, what sort of feedback do I need to give, how quickly can you get from that request to the actual code and give feedback? That's a productivity measure. I share new resources in the Discord channel. Please do not burn your brains. Is there a need to use transaction here? Isn't save changes enough? I didn't understand the need. I might have missed something. Okay. Save changes because of our Dallas's library, right? Not a problem, not a complaint, because of specifications. When I add an object, it immediately calls save changes, right? So if I don't put the transaction here, that transaction is now committed, that event fires, and that is done, right? So when I go into register tenant async in my domain service here, and I check to see if the tenant exists, then add an address. If I don't have the transaction, that now flushes to the database. That, by virtue of doing that, will publish a domain event, right? Which in this instance doesn't do anything, but that's not the point. The next one does, right? So when I go and I create my tenant, that publishes tenant address was associated. The moment I hit this add async, it saves changes. Yeah, Control F12. It's always been there in Rider. I mean, if it wasn't for the funny thing is, if it wasn't for ReSharper, which is JetBrains, right? If it wasn't for ReSharper in Visual Studio, the Visual Studio experience wouldn't be anywhere near where it is today. Yeah, because of Ardalis's library calls save changes, right? If I go to implementation here, now go to implementation on the repository base, it calls save changes. So because it calls save changes, I don't want it to save these in atomically, right? I want it to save it as I want it to commit the transaction. So that's why the transaction is necessary, right? That one line existing in add async forced my hand, right? I couldn't do anything, and that's kind of why this entire refactoring has happened. That one line, right? It's why I committed to using the clean. Yeah, I wonder why you did that. I wish you hadn't done that. I understand now. That's what I said. That's kind of where I've been, right? I've said I'm using a library. That library's design decision has influenced my entire progress for 2 weeks on this project, right? I have changed path. I have learned more in 2 weeks about the architecture of clean architecture. I now believe that I understand exactly how clean architecture is built, right? Based upon the samples and why people do things differently, right? So I have a better understanding, but that one line calls that because I've used a library that does something different. And the answer, the question you ask yourself is, you know, pain points, right? If I follow this path down and let it take me where it has taken me, am I pushing against the design decision of the library creator, or am I actually going with the flow? Going with the flow will feel a lot easier, and that's what I've done, right? I've gone with the flow here. I've embraced it a little bit more, rather than I could have come up with some convoluted solution around it, and some might argue I have made a convoluted solution around the problem, but it does now solve my problem. Well, he'll have a reason for why that happens, and I often would have couldn't add save the record though. Well, that's the reason why. So I have an option. I can drop specifications and write my own stuff, which at this point I don't fancy doing. I think I'm gaining a lot from specifications, especially on the query side. Query side, 100% better. I love specifications. I can now understand exactly why they save me time, right? So I'm gonna own the library, but or own that decision. Where what's called the add. Yeah. So in the domain service, well, actually any one of these things, right? So this is the domain service because it does more than one thing, right? These are individual commands that can be processed as they are. So if I go into any one of these, right, I call create on the object and I say add. That add, go in here, calls save changes at its base level, right? Oh, look at that pattern. It's like I've seen this before. That add calls save changes. So because I am using that, I question why you're calling add here. Why wouldn't I call add here? What would I call instead? Why would I not call add there? I'm adding it to the repository. So if I'm understanding the problem right, you have multiple things you want to save to DB, and you want to delay saving them until the transaction is done. No, I don't want to delay saving them. I still want to save them in situ. I got some design. The save change is a standalone transaction. It's also a unit of work implementation, and Outbox knows this anyway. Yeah. There's address and tenant there. That makes the whole thing savable. Yeah, that part of my process can be saved. And if it was to work atomically, then it would be saved, right? If I wanted to add a new tenant, I only add a new tenant with an address, and a tenant and an address are what constitutes the beginnings of the organization, right? I wonder if it's a scope problem in your repository is what I'm getting at. I don't think so. And again, don't forget, I'm not implementing repository. Right, repository is a generic layer for me right now. Right, I don't have a specific repository. There is no tenant repository or address repository implementation. There is only repository, and I'm using it to add entities to that repository. So right now, this feels very natural. Oh no, we're not going down that one. Please don't take me down that path. Doing all I can to to not go even further down, because it's very tempting to keep exploring this design and keep going deeper and deeper and actually landing on probably what would be the ultimate solution, right? But I don't want to go down that path. And the moment we get to aggregates, we get into a whole different world, right? So maybe we will cover aggregates in a future stream. Maybe that's where we head eventually. But I don't want to head there with this project right now, because I feel that by the time I'm done with this, I will have an understanding of the domain in a way that I did not do many months prior, right? So I think that I need to do it this way. And what feels good about this way is it's very clean. There is no major chunks of behavior that I can't switch out, right? I can repeat, this pattern, and I can build the system in a way that I can visually see. Ignore the above message. But I appreciate you thinking through this as well, and I appreciate the effort. Yeah, and I don't want to go I don't want to go down the path. Maybe well, what is wrong? That you're talking about a guy who develops software. He is a consultant. He develops software professionally, right? So what is wrong? It's not wrong. It's his implementation of this forces my hand a little bit, and I could have gone two ways, right? Right, that's what I'm saying. Or if we are just implementing things slightly incorrectly. Yes, maybe there is some challenge here that I need to overcome somewhere else. Maybe I'll find that point. Maybe I won't. Maybe it'll take someone coming in and go, oh, well, you're doing that wrong to do that. But at this point, my overall point here is I'm not scared of that happening now, right? I know enough about the way the system is built. I know enough about the components I'm using. And that's an important thing, right? You shouldn't, if you're pulling a library into your project, you should at least understand enough about how it works to use it. And maybe I didn't understand enough of I understood the specifications aspect. Maybe I didn't understand the implications of pulling in what it would do, right? So yeah, regardless. So the transaction here is because if any one of these pieces fails, I don't want any of this data, right? So we could definitely discuss later down the line is what is, because what I'm talking about as an organization is an organization in aggregate when you have users and associated users with tenants and addresses and things like that. Is organization the aggregate that we work with there, or is there something totally different, right? So I don't want to get into that path because it would be dangerous of me to start that path of thinking about aggregates and to start to break this up even further. Whereas right now I can make some good choices, and with this pattern, as long as this next test doesn't fail, which will determine where we go from here. As long as this next test doesn't fail, then we should be okay. I just need to do something first. But I'm interested in. I'm not trying to squash the discussion, by the way. So thank you very much for not for continuing. Not yeah. That would include everything below that. Tenant repository will be the aggregate. I think that would include everything below that, and that change would also change your logic on the events. Should those sends in the aggregate or outside? Yeah, I'm continuing regardless. Yeah. No, explore again. It's why I'm going to kind of create a side project to try and experiment with some of this code and this style, so that we can better discuss. Because I realize that I'm kind of creating a closed system here, and maybe a year from now, if things aren't going the way I think they should do, if I'm not as passionate about this project, or I think that it couldn't be a product, then I will completely open source everything I've done, right? But for now, with the hope that I could turn this into something, I don't want to necessarily open source it. And it's not because I'm scared about people taking the code and running with it, right? I'm scared of having to, well, some of the stuff would be obviously proprietary, but for the most part, it's more if I put this as open source, then I open it up for contributions, and there's obviously a lot of ideas and thoughts, and I don't want to be in a world where I'm saying, hey, no, I don't like that. I don't want to do it that way. I'm not doing it that way, and rejecting pull requests, because then it just squashes that innovation, and that's not what this project's about, right? Um, so I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the engagement for certain. I'm just trying to order breakfast because if I don't eat something, I'm going to be in trouble before karate. You need to create issues and stuff, so you'd ask for something and people would deliver, that kind of thing. To go the other way is anarchy. Mm-hmm. So I'm just making sure I order breakfast, and then I can finish up here. Okay, in my opinion, I think he might have wanted to save the record of the generic repository at that moment and use the ID information somewhere. Actually, there is no need for this in EF Core, but there is definitely a logical reason for it. Fidelity is one of the software masters. In my opinion, the tenant here is a standalone aggregate root. And I have no issues with anybody debating there. So let's test the ultimate thing. So I have put the work into making sure we can disconnect the. Here's what I need to test. I need to validate this. No, I'm an application. I'm in the right thing. I need to know subscribers. Tenant user was registered. Tenant was registered. Okay, if I hit this breakpoint now, I am stuck. I've got to go and look at something else. But I mean, I've been asked my reason for doing something and not had a good one because it wasn't something I thought deep on, but that's more common than thinking deeper on everything. Yeah. Hi, Connie. How you doing? Good day. Short stream. I'm almost at the normal time anyway. Luckily, everyone stayed asleep and the dogs have settled, so I've had a bit more time than I thought I would have done. And I got all my stuff started. So, the benefits of getting up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday. So. Right. We have a transaction wrapped around our use case, right? We have a disconnected process for we have an outbox for the transaction for the events. So even if events get published, they do not get immediately acted upon. They're not actually published within Mediator. We put them to an outbox. That outbox is constantly monitoring and processing those messages. If these records in save changes still get put into the database and just not committed, which is what I expect they will do, right? And our worker service picks it up, it will hit that breakpoint, even though it's not committed, because I'm going to put an exception in here, right? So at that point, we need to go and look at how to make sure that we're only reading committed records from SQL Server. So that's this test. If this does not hit the breakpoint, then we're good. The event never published, and we won't see any records in our notification outbox anyway. Let's go. Rebuild my complete smart home. I got killed mid in December because of a Raspberry outage. I had to find every sensor in my home and reconnect it. So yeah, kind of fine. And you got progress, everything works fine. It's getting there. It's getting there. Nice. Complete off grid. Oh, you're one of them people. Failing. So it doesn't really matter what I do here, but I do need it to be a user. Ellen Smith. E. Smith. Okay, so let's go. We get an exception. We hit no breakpoint. We have no notifications. We are good. Right? Yes, we are good. That is doing exactly what it should do. Okay, so Outbox. Let's review. We have implemented a Mediator Outbox, which might seem excessive. It might be excessive, but it does solve our problems, right? In the event of a use case, right, where we have a transaction wrapped around everything, we add many records, and as part of that, when we add when we call add async, these events will get processed because the save changes will trigger. Save changes has an interceptor in it, which will automatically publish domain events out into our publisher, right? Which, if that is our regular Mediator publisher, that will be acted upon immediately. So what we've done is disconnected that by putting that behind a SQL Server Outbox implementation. So those events now get pushed into a table, right? Interesting. That table is then processed, and those events are then republished and acted upon properly. What I just verified was that those events, even though they are saved, they're not committed to the database. Therefore, my query from the Outbox piece here, is not going to pick them up. Right? So my worry was that if they got put in even temporarily as non-read committed, they'd still get pulled out. But it looks like by default, Entity Framework is only going to read committed records. It's not going to get those records out. You guys are talking about work stuff, so I'm not gonna jump in that. Let me add another feature for the future. After the sent message is processed by the service listening to Kafka, will these services send messages again saying I've completed the job? You plan to keep these messages in the Outbox database you published? So that's a question, right? So there's two parts to that, right? Do I care about these events long term? Probably not. It's not a bad audit, right? It's not a terrible audit of the process. For now, maybe these get deleted. I think actually updating this process is probably safer, because then I'm not doing mass deletes. Because if I'm trying to write to this table at the same time as deleting from this table, there's going to be a lot of churn on those indexes as well. So I think it's safer to put the date processed in for right now. Maybe there's a process that cleans these up on a weekly basis in the long term. This is the sort of stuff, though, that decision can come back to bite me later on, right? Because this can be something that sits out there for years and never gets handled, and there's no need for it. But this table continually grows. So this table in a year's time is 2 or 3 million records, because one action just created 5 events, right? The obviously the result of these is these then publish Kafka messages, but like you said, right, will those other pieces now confirm that they've completed what they need to do, and then these messages get removed because now they don't need to trigger again? Because in theory, I could retest the system by wiping them out, and these events would all fire again. You cannot delete the completed messages, but move them to another table if you want to audit them. Yeah, well, I could delete them, because these are just things happened in my system. I don't need this as the actual record. I don't want to use the Outbox for the record of what I've done. I'm actually going to add in some behavior monitors for these things anyway, right? So I'm gonna put in, what I want to do is look at OpenTelemetry and creating a behavior pipeline in Mediator that then tracks these events and publishes them out that way, right? So the actual audit of these messages is not really the concern of the Outbox. The Outbox is just the Outbox, and that's kind of holding to my whole, one thing for one thing, not one thing for many problems. Okay, so next steps. Well, we need to share this, don't we? Right? This is part of my agreed behavior of anything we develop that's potentially useful will be shared outside of the stream, right? Outside of the main code base. Step 1 is just, I'm going to get a repository up for this now. Step 2 will be to actually do all the NuGet packages and stuff, because that's a lot longer. I'll do that later today, I would imagine. But I am running out of time quickly here. But I will get this up there and published for everybody to judge. If you feel there's more unit tests actually appropriate on these things at this point, you're more than welcome to see if you can write some. I'd be interested to know if anyone has any opinions on those, on what unit tests could be written around that behavior. What am I doing? I'm thinking. It's always a problem when you don't start with version control. Share projects on GitHub. Mediator Outbox, not private. Origin. Outbox implementation along Outbox core with background. So the next steps on this will be to add some extension methods to tidy up that piece so we don't have to define all the interfaces in the actual code base. Then make the NuGet packages. You could also create a scheduled version of this as well. I don't want to add them. I do want to add that. Do not want to add. Oh, why can I not? I want to create a Mediator Outbox. I think we need to add a git ignore first. Dot git ignore. Visual Studio git ignore. Actually, I can take the git ignore from my main project, can't I? This git ignore is perfectly fine for this one. Okay. That works. Initial commit. Oh, why? Why do you always do this? Name. They need to catch up with that. They really do. GitHub does it. Okay, so we have. I will share in. Where do I want to share this? I've shared it in the Discord. So for those joining for the first time today, there is a Discord available. It is linked in the bottom of the card on YouTube and on Twitch, but you can go there as well. All the code I've just been working on today, the Outbox component is available in my main GitHub. Next week we will begin. On Monday, I'm going to start working on the Water Drink Water project, which will be open sourced. I'm going to structure it. I'm going to get the code pieces in a similar style, maybe. We will be working on UI for that one to start with. I'm not going to be silly and do that API only. But that one will be something that if you want to look at, if you want to do pull requests against, you can do. We'll review all pull requests on stream. I will not do, and I would love to have interaction, because one of the things that will appear quickly there, and it has done in the past, is a differing of opinion in naming, a differing of opinion in style, how hard it is to manage standards when people have differing opinions about what something should be called. Yeah. So I think that concludes what I need to do today. So where does that leave me for this project that I seem to have just created a challenge for? Oh, that's because that all moved around. Thanks for sharing. Will the insertion process into the outbox and the interceptor be separated from the project later? Well, oh, so the interceptor itself. You mean you want me to share this piece? Is that what you mean? Or actually split it out? Sorry, I forget that I don't have the camera on today, so you can't actually see that. I'm just watching. Up to you. I mean, yeah, I can build. So you mean basically open source the interceptor component of this, right? Or because this makes sense now. I really do like this pattern. I can kind of it's opened up so many different areas for me that I want to think about. Um, the problem I was trying to avoid with the Outbox stuff was right, and that's why I call it kind of notification publisher, is because the Outbox doesn't know about domain events, right? The Outbox just knows that it's got things it needs to, it has messages that it needs to deal with and then publish to Mediator's publish, right? That's all it cares about. They're not necessarily domain. You could queue anything into this, right? As long as it's an I notification, everything could be queued in this. So I was trying to avoid the domain event. So I'm not sure where this lives is the challenge, right? This is definitely going to come out of here, right? This domain event publisher is absolutely going to come out of here. So maybe I create a small shared kernel that I actually do open source that has some of these basic components in it, right? And kind of cuts the is that even used anymore? Yeah, these are my cat. These are the. So if I actually break down if I actually start using my own Kafka library instead of using this version of it still, and split out this, maybe there is a kind of a core project there to be built that could actually be useful as a shared piece. You could just and maybe we find that out when we do the new projects, right? Because we're going to end up copying and pasting some pieces, I would imagine, if we want to do the same things and learn from that. So maybe that's the way. But I'm open to ideas. I'm open to thoughts on this. If and I do truly mean it. If you guys have any thoughts on what I can do to improve the stream, what I can do to improve the Discord, if there's videos you would like me to make that you think that I could make for you, I'm open to ideas and thoughts there. Because I want to grow, I want to learn. I don't mind admitting I don't know something. I don't mind admitting I am weaker on certain things. There's a lot of things I'm confident in. Generally, writing code I'm very confident in. Whether I'm good at writing code, that's an opinion, right? So, yeah, if there's other things you'd like me to look at, feel free to let me know. But in the meantime, that is going to be it for me. I'm going to just end the stream today. I'm not going to mess around with raiding because I have to go and do other things. Hopefully, can make it to my karate class this morning. And yeah, that is where we will leave it today. I will return on Monday. We'll start looking at water, drink water. as we're going to call it, and that will go up into the TBD Friends repositories. So yeah, and I hope you have a great weekend. I'll no doubt see people around on Twitch throughout the day and the weekend. I'm sure. And yeah, have a great weekend, all. Thank you for everything. Thank you for your contributions, and take care. Thanks, Nicholas. And we will look at that. We'll have to look at some analysis once we get some events in to see if that index would make a change. So please do not forget about that. And I'll see you all later. Take care, all. Have a good one.